Hey y'all, welcome back to the finale, the final episode, the best episode of my recap of the Fallout TV show. So this is episode number 8 out of 8, and this is where all of the character storylines, all of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G plots converge and reveal their secrets. We finally learn where all of these characters that we've met throughout the show fit together, as well as learn the biggest plot twist of the entire show, in my opinion. I mean, there's a lot in this episode, so I'm sure people have different opinions on which one is the most insane, but they drop them all at the same time, much like the bombs in 2077. So we're going to jump right into it. Of course, if you haven't seen the show and you don't want to be spoiled, this is basically the biggest spoiler episode of the entire show. There's really no way that you can watch this video without having the main plot points spoiled to you. So don't watch this if that's not something that you're trying to have done. But I'm going to go into as much as I can, as much as I was able to find online and from my memory of the games. Yeah, I'm really excited. So let's get into it. So as we left off in episode 7, Max had just given the real head of Wildsig, the scientist from the Enclave, to Lucy, and he took a random deceased person's head, smashed it on the ground, and made it look like possibly someone that could look like the actual target. And that's what he's planning on giving to the Brotherhood. We start with Max riding in a vertibird with several Brotherhood knights on the way to the Brotherhood themselves to present his head. Obviously, they have made note that he is wearing knight's armor, and his actual knight, Titus, is not present. So they're of course going to be questioning him on why that's the case. So instead of taking Max to the Brotherhood's actual outpost at the unnamed military base that we've seen them operating from thus far, they actually take him to Philly, and we can hear over the intercom the knights discussing with each other that the locals put up a fight, but it was not a problem. So they took Philly by force, most likely killed several people in the process, and they are now occupying Philly and using it as their current base of operations, most likely temporary, but I guess we'll see if that's actually the case. So Max walks up to Quintus, and we see Dane for a hot second. They make eye contact, but Quintus is waiting at the top of some steps where everybody is lined up, and he immediately questions Max on where his knight is. Max tells him he's dead. He doesn't offer any further explanation at this time. He just tells him that Titus is dead. Quintus points out that this happens a lot with Max, that people around him seem to die or get hurt often. As he is doing so, they are taking the head to another Brotherhood member who has some sort of scanner, and it does not detect the relic, as they're calling it. So they know that the head is fake, and just as they're about to sentence Max to death, Dane steps in and tells Quintus that the injury that was previously blamed on Max was actually Dane's own doing, and that Max is innocent and should be spared because he's a good man. So Quintus concedes to this, seeing an act of loyalty, which is not something he's used to seeing in the Brotherhood anymore. I guess he's pointing out that the Brotherhood is becoming more and more corrupt, and no one can be trusted. Not that Quintus himself is the most trustworthy guy, but, I digress. So Quintus takes Max to another secluded area and asks him what happened to Titus, and Max tells him he died running, he died a coward. That's all he can say. Quintus doesn't really care about the actual well-being of the Brotherhood members. He's just disappointed that Titus was a coward and that he wasn't even able to defend himself against a squire. And so Quintus points out that Max has understood the fundamental exchange of power, and that it is not given, but rather taken. And he takes this opportunity with Max in a place of vulnerability. His life is at stake, his honor is at stake. He could easily ignore Dane's suggestion, ignore Max's explanation, and kill Max anyway, because that's what the Brotherhood's protocol is. But instead, he takes this as an opportunity to blackmail Max, subtly, and tell him that he plans to overthrow the Brotherhood and become its new leader, with Max as its sword, as he calls it, the violent means to overthrowing the Brotherhood. Max obviously probably isn't on board with this, considering he wants to just go back to the vault with Lucy and live in La La Land, not understanding the actual state of Vault 32 and 33. But he doesn't really have much of a choice on his own, so he just doesn't say anything in this moment, but I'm sure his internal monologue was fighting against it. So finally we're taken to the observatory, where we know now that Moldaver is hiding, although I don't know if she would really consider it hiding. But Lucy has arrived at the observatory with the actual head of Wildsig, and she's immediately led into the gates. And so this is the remnants of the NCR, is who lives at this observatory after Shady Sands was destroyed. We can see that they have a fully self-sufficient cornfield outside that's giving them food. There's also a market where you can see other fruits and vegetables that are being sold. There's children running around, there's families, it's a fully functioning society, the refugees of Shady Sands. We see for a second the ghoul from the Super Duper Mart, which is one of the ghouls that Lucy freed, and he actually thanked her, and he recognizes her immediately and just kind of points to her. I enjoyed getting to see that little callback to that episode, and I do hope that he plays a part in future episodes as well. He seems like a very uniquely designed ghoul that could be a really interesting character to join in with the whole crew that we've been building. So just as Lucy's about to enter the observatory, we skip over to Cooper, and where he is currently headed with Dogmeat to the same place, to the observatory, in search of Moldaver. At this point, we still don't know why he's looking for her, but everybody is slowly converging in on the observatory. It's going to be the final battle scene of everything. Everything goes down at the observatory at the end of the season. Yet another flashback. There's going to be a lot of jumping back and forth between flashbacks and present day in this episode. And there's some damn good flashbacks in this episode. So Cooper has made his own excuse to drop his wife off at work. Usually his wife drives herself, they have their own cars, but as Cooper mentions, he bungled her oil change, most likely intentionally, so that he would have an excuse to drive her to work himself. And of course the reason that he wants to drive her to work himself is so that he can be in range of her during this big meeting, and he can spy on her using the listening device that Moldaver gave him. So they pull up, and Barb gets out of the car, and she starts heading to her office. And just as Cooper is about to start listening to her, another much smaller car pulls up next to them, and it has good old Bud Askins in it. Now, I don't know if the reason he has this tiny car is because he doesn't make as much money as Barb does, or if he just chooses to have a small car. But I kind of saw it as a way of showing that Bud he just doesn't make as much money, doesn't have the luxuries, and that he might hold some resentment or jealousy for his peers that really push him to develop the program that he's so passionate about, thinking that it will push him to the very top of the corporate ladder, as it were. But in any case, he gets out of his little car, and he starts chatting it up with Cooper, who's annoyed, as usual. And he pitches to Cooper his Bud's Bud program, which is solving the problem of the human lifespan not being long enough to really create perfect leaders, perfect society. In the middle of his explanation to Cooper, who is not the least interested, Barb comes and grabs him, tells him to come inside with her because they have an important meeting. And from here, Cooper is in full surveillance mode, listening to everything that his wife says or anything that can be heard within earshot of her Pip-Boy. Unfortunately, he loses signal whenever she enters the Vault-Tec building. Whether that's a design flaw of this listening device, or if Vault-Tec actually has some sort of electromagnetic field around the building to keep people from being able to surveil inside, I think that's more likely, is that they're trying to protect their secrets. And so he has to actually go inside the building and follow his wife in there to be able to listen to her. And that's where that scene cuts, and we are taken back to Lucy as she enters the main upstairs area of the observatory. I don't know what you would call that room, but there's a massive hole blown in the wall that you can see the horizon, the remnants of Shady Sands and everything. And Moldaver is sitting there at a table with a whole meal out in front of her, and next to her is a ghoul that's just kind of sitting there making ghoul noises. It's a feral ghoul. It's not a sentient one. And then to her right is Lucy's father in a cage. His skin is super red and burned and peeling, likely from being dragged across the wasteland for several days to get here. So Lucy's in full revenge mode. She approaches Moldaver. She's pissed. She talks about how she had all of these ideas for how she was going to present this, including an idea of shoving a grenade into the head so that it would explode and blow everybody up. But then she says, "That's not really how I was raised." Meaning, I was not raised to blow up my enemies. Incredibly ironic. Yes. Definitely. Because, as we're about to learn, that is actually exactly who raised her. Lucy sticks with her pacifist upbringing and hands over the head, albeit forcefully, to Moldaver, and then immediately asks for her dad back. Moldaver extracts the cold fusion thingy, little tic-tac, that has been embedded in this rotting head for several days, and offers to explain to Lucy how she knows her dad and her reasoning for this entire situation of stealing her dad, of asking for the head. Basically, just saying, hey, I'll give you your dad back, but first, do you want to know why I took him and how I know him? So while Moldaver is starting this explanation, we see Norm, who is still in Vault 31, walk into the second room with the Robo-Bud. It is Bud Askins and his brain encased in a little tiny robot on wheels that is stuck behind a mop handle. Norm frees him, and Bud, thinking that he was supposed to be Betty, realizes that he's not, and he humorously tries to stop Norm with this little syringe, assuming it's a sedative, trying to stop him, but Norm obviously just steps over the robot because it's essentially a Roomba with a brain on it. And so Norm steps past Bud and heads into the main room, which holds the ultimate secret of Vault 31. Meanwhile, we're back in the flashback. Cooper, who has entered the Vault-Tec building, and he's being escorted to his wife's office by none other than Betty Pearson. The Betty Pearson, who is the current overseer in 22 whatever year it is, of Vault 33. So she drops Cooper off in Barb's office and then mentions a Henry, who was the employee that called the house that one time, and Cooper immediately hung up on him because he was annoying. She explains that Henry's a huge fan of Cooper and would love to meet him while he's waiting on his wife to be done in her fancy meeting. So Cooper agrees, and he sits down, and you'll notice all over Barb's office is movie posters for Cooper. So although she is part of an awful organization and is complicit in doing awful things, at least she supports her husband's former profession. He's not really doing much movie making anymore now that he is a representative of Vault-Tec. But we finally get to see this big meeting that Barb is attending with Bud. So it's this huge room with a giant modern chandelier above it, and it's Bud and Barb, and they're facing 4 executives of these massive companies that are working with Vault-Tec. And then behind the executives in the dark is a bunch of other people, likely just lower ranked employees of the same companies that are listening into this meeting. So Bud opens the meeting, welcoming everybody to Vault-Tec, and we get a nice shot of all of the leaders. So, in order, we have Robco, obviously led by Mr. House, the one and only. And then we have West-Tec, led by Leon von Felden, who is an FEV scientist with West-Tec that spearheaded the development of FEV. And then we have Big MT, with obviously Frederick Sinclair, or Freddy, as Mr. House later refers to him as, who is the founder of the Sierra Madre Casino, which we get to see in the New Vegas DLC. And then Repcon, led by Julia Masters, who is the CFO of Repcon. So they are the main talking heads that are attending this big meeting. So they start with a little bit of light banter, and this is where Mr. House refers to Frederick Sinclair as Freddy and tells him that he could lose money running a casino, which is a very funny quote, considering the Sierra Madre is a casino that Frederick was developing and never ended up opening because of the war. So in that way, he did lose all of his money on a casino. So Bud explains that their vault program is the answer to the apocalypse, because they have a guaranteed survival rate underground while everybody on the surface dies. Bud is really counting on everybody on the surface dying. It's not even a question that anybody could survive up there in the event of nuclear annihilation, which is an understandable stance to have on it, but I think it's an obvious flaw in his logic, and obviously all of Vault-Tec's logic, to completely rule out the idea that people could survive. So they're essentially trying to pitch the Vault program to these companies to get them to support them financially. And so all of the leaders start arguing about how realistic the vaults could be, about, you know, the financial risk of it, and that there's a lot of holes in the logic that don't guarantee that it's really going to work. And in the middle of all of their arguments, Barb gets a message on her Pip-Boy, and she looks down at it. We don't get to see what it actually says, but she looks up, and there's a window at the very top back of the room where we just see the silhouette of a man looking down at her. It is not explained who this is, but the logical conclusion to come to is that it is the CEO, CFO, somebody of Vault-Tec. It is Bud and Barb's boss. And he's obviously told her to really get down to business to clear up all of the arguments going on. So Barb interrupts them, and she begins anew in giving them the reason that they should support these vaults. Cooper, who's listening, is supporting his wife. He's like, come on, Barb, set him straight, because he's expecting her to be the voice of reason. Knowing his wife as a loving, caring person, he's counting on her to be a moral beacon for these greedy corporate businessmen. So as Barb begins to explain the Vault program and what they're offering to these companies, Norm discovers Vault 31's secret. He walks into the other room, he turns on all the lights, and he finds that all Vault 31 is a massive room of cryopods holding 200-plus-year-old employees of Vault-Tec. And Bud, Robo-Bud, behind Norm, is explaining the program to him, pitching it in his normal salesman, irritating voice. And he explains to Norm that these people will take over and become the new society of humans after they have wiped the surface clean. And Norm catches that, and he questions it. He's like, what do you mean, wipe the surface clean? We aren't given a direct explanation of what that means by Bud, but I think it's safe to assume that Vault-Tec's plans included killing any survivors that were on the surface, so that they could make way for the Vault Dwellers once they were released. So, Barb finally goes into her explanation. They show a big map of all of the vaults that they have across the country, which I think is the first time we've ever actually seen a map showing the location of all the vaults. I don't believe at any point in time in any of the games that we've ever actually had a map shown to us that has all of the vaults' location, which there's over 100 of them, as we all know. But Barb explains that they, Vault-Tec, are going to offer a portion of these vaults to each of the companies to allow them to play out their idea of what a perfect society is. No questions asked, no restrictions. They can do whatever they want. They just have to send them the money to purchase the vaults. They have to become part of the Vault-Tec program. So all of the corporate leaders immediately start firing off ideas, and almost all of these were actually realized into actual vaults. So Frederick suggests a vault that is overcrowded intentionally to see what would happen, basically. They really immediately throw out the window the idea of trying to create a perfect society, and they just want to have a playground to run their experiments, their ideas, the implementation of their technology in ways that would otherwise be highly, highly unethical. So Frederick's suggestion was realized in Vault 27, which was a vault that was overcrowded with a bunch of people intentionally. Julia suggests a vault with a milk-delivering robot that is the leader of said vault, which is really weird, and this vault never actually existed, as far as we know. There's no examples of this kind of vault in the games. A stupid idea anyway. Not that the others are good, but this one's just pointless. Leon suggests a vault where they could take illegal immigrants and turn them into super mutant soldiers. At this point, super mutants don't actually exist, and he's purely using the phrase super mutant as a descriptor of somebody who is genetically modified and mutated in an extreme way to create a soldier. This vault does technically exist. I would say Vault 87 is the first one I thought about, but super mutants were actually initially created at the Mariposa military base, which also was created by West-Tec. So Leon already had these plans set in motion with that military base and FEV. I think that Vault 87 and possibly other vaults that West-Tec came to own could have been used to develop super mutants further. But 87 is the first one that comes to mind. There's a suggestion to pump psychotropic drugs into the air supply. That is Vault 106, which is the blue vault, as many people call it. It's just a bunch of blue gas, and whenever you enter into the vault, you start to have hallucinations of really weird stuff. There is the child separated from parents vault, where they try to continuously breed perfect humans, eugenics, essentially, and kill any of the children that don't come up to those standards. This vault technically exists. I think the closest would be Vault 75, which was an all-child vault, where they brought in families and they separated the children and the parents immediately. The parents were executed instantly. The children were sent to the other side of the vault, and they were raised and eventually bred. So these suggestions were made by all of the three leaders besides Mr. House. And instead of making his suggestions, he asks about the risk. How can they guarantee that these vaults will be used and that the world will end? And this is where Barb drops the bomb and explains that Vault-Tec is prepared to be the first one to drop a bomb, to initiate the end of the world, to make sure that these vaults will get their use, that the world will end, and that Mr. House and all of these other corporate executives' money won't be wasted. Fiduciary responsibility, as Charlie Whiteknife explained previously. Naturally, Cooper hearing this, his life falls apart before him. You can see it on his face. He is absolutely shocked that those words just came out of his beloved wife's mouth. That she is prepared to kill billions of people in order to save just him and his daughter. And I gotta say, my reaction was pretty similar. I was appalled. I think it had always been theorized that Vault-Tec dropped the bombs because, for example, on the bomb in Megaton, you can see a logo on it, very faded, that is very, very similar, if not an exact Vault-Tec logo, as well as the bomb that you see with the Wild Wastelander perk in New Vegas. Although that one you really can't take to heart very much because it's Wild Wasteland. But the Megaton bomb, at least, has been evidence enough for people to have these theories ever since the game came out, that Vault-Tec was the ones to drop the bomb. And now we have canon proof that they did. Or at least they were prepared to. We still don't know if they were actually the ones that did it. So as Cooper is trying to battle with this insane sentence that he just heard from his wife, Betty is bringing in Henry, who is the employee that wanted to meet Cooper. And Cooper turns around, and lo and behold, who is it? It's Hank McClane, with some really terrible CGI trying to de-age him. It's some of the worst that I've seen. It was a very, very well executed plot twist. And then we get the absolutely excellently delivered "War never changes" line from Barb.
War never changes.
So cold. That line never gets old, and they did a really good job of weaving it into the dialogue. She is fully sold and on board with Vault-Tec and their horrific ideals, because everything is justified by the fact that war never changes. Meanwhile, Max and Dane at the Brotherhood are preparing for an assault on the observatory. Everybody in the Brotherhood is gearing up, getting their guns, their armor, to lead an assault on the observatory and the NCR. Max thanks Dane for standing up for him and explains to them that he is planning on going back to the vault with Lucy, and he's super excited about it because it's safe, there's no war, there's no death, everybody is happy. And Dane immediately is like, bro, that don't exist. Alright, sorry to tell you, but nowhere is safe. And also, you can't just leave the Brotherhood. That's not something that you can just be like, peace out, you know? They're gonna come after you if you try to leave. And then they hop in the vertibirds and they head towards the observatory. So, Lucy asks Moldaver about her mother and what she knows about her mother. Moldaver explains to Lucy about where her father is from, about the fact that he is not actually someone who was born in Vault 31, and that he was born before the war, and she tells her that her mother also was not aware of this fact, and she believed all of the same ideals and lies that Lucy and the other inhabitants of the vault believe, and that she was smart enough to deduce from the fact that something was siphoning their vault's water supply that there could possibly be life on the surface, which is something that no one believed in the vaults was a possibility. And so she, Lucy's mother, ended up taking Lucy and her brother Norm out of Vault 33, so that this is when the door was initially opened. As far as we know, the door was not opened any time before this. She takes Lucy and Norm to live in Shady Sands, and we get a couple of quick shots of what Shady Sands looked like. We see like a functioning train. It's like a 1920s-esque vibe to it as far as the design and technology. It looks really cool. Like we've never seen a post-war civilization this fleshed out in any of the games. And so Moldaver explains that when Hank found out about this, he obviously got mad and came back, took his kids back to the vault, and then burnt Shady Sands to the ground. He wiped it out. He is the one that destroyed it, destroyed Max's home, sent all of those refugees fleeing to Vault 4, and sent all of the NCR refugees fleeing to the observatory. He decimated an entire settlement, civilization, if you will. So Lucy, grappling with these facts, asks Moldaver what happened to my mom. Moldaver doesn't tell her flat out, but she tells her, I think you know. And then Lucy looks back at the ghoul that had been sitting at the table and notices the necklace that her mother always wore burned into her flesh, essentially proving that this is what's left of her mother, whom she had been told died to an evident famine within Vault 33, the famine of 2277. And so, whole breakdown, sad womp womp moment for Lucy. Mom's dead. Dad killed her. Feels bad. Meanwhile, Hank is trying to argue with her the whole time, saying that this is all lies. She's lying. Come on, let's just go home. Lucy's not an idiot, so she doesn't believe this. And so Moldaver explains to Lucy that the only reason that she took her dad was because the only way to activate the cold fusion was with a Vault-Tec executive's code, because Vault-Tec had bought the rights of cold fusion from Moldaver, made it proprietary, and locked it out from anybody else being able to activate and use it. So Lucy tells her dad, give her the code. She tells him multiple times to give her the code, and he does eventually give her the code. Somehow I completely forgot to mention this in my original recording, but the code that Lucy's father enters is actually the release date of the original Fallout game, which was October 10th, 1997. Cool, thanks, bye. So Moldaver immediately goes and plugs the cold fusion tic-tac in, puts in the code, and it starts, charging up, whatnot. Hank is continuing to beg Lucy to let him out. Yeah, she's lost all faith in her father. She knows who he is. She's not on his side anymore. And her world has fallen apart, much like it did for Cooper all those years ago. So Norm has discovered the secret of Vault 31, and he realizes all of this is lies, and I'm sure through his head he's like, I gotta go back and tell everybody and, do something. There's a scene where we get to see like a screen of everybody's name who has been released and who is still inside the cryopods. I did look up the name of every single person on there, and there's no references to any other characters in the games. All of those names are unique and only appear in the show. So, in case you were wondering, there are no Easter eggs that I could find within that little list of names of Vault-Tec executives. So Norm tries to leave, but Bud tells him, no, I'm not going to let you out. You're trapped in here. Either you can hop in your dad's cryopod to survive, or you can starve to death. And so Norm is essentially locked inside of 31 with no way of getting help. And that's the last that we see of him from this season. So, back to Moldaver trying to activate the cold fusion. Just as she's about to press the big red button to activate it, the Brotherhood arrive and start their attack on the observatory. Lots of cool slow-mo scenes of the Brotherhood and NCR fighting, which is very satisfying to anybody who has played New Vegas and imagined how cool the final fight of Hoover Dam actually is, but the game's limitations were nowhere near being able to actually flesh out what that battle would look like. So up until now, it was really just up to our imagination to see what that battle looked like. So this was a very rewarding battle scene to see, especially with the giant NCR flag flying. It was awesome. In the middle of all this fighting, within the observatory, Cooper appears and gives a little monologue about how he used to wear the Brotherhood armor and that it had a very specific flaw in it, and he tests out that flaw with his little micro nuke revolver and shoots it up underneath the chest plate of one of the Brotherhood knights and detonates inside the armor, instantly killing the knight. And then he turns the lights off and he just starts lighting them up, killing one after the other. So previously when he was fighting Max, who was in his power armor, this current scene is just more proof that he was holding back all of his potential power, and he was just toying with Max during that fight, because he easily could have killed him in one shot had he really wanted to. So he wipes out like almost all of the Brotherhood soldiers within the observatory. And as Hank is trying to reconcile with Lucy and convince her to let him out, Max somehow makes it out of that fight, and he stumbles into the clearing where Lucy and Hank are. So Hank immediately latches onto Max and asks him to let him out because he's Lucy's father, and this is what she's been looking for. And so Max, being the blindly trusting person that he tends to be, lets Hank out, and then Lucy explains to Max what happened, what Hank did, and the fact that he is the reason that Max lost his home and his family. But while she's explaining this, Hank is putting on some power armor from a headless soldier, courtesy of Cooper. And when Max stupidly tries to take on a power armored soldier with his bare hands, Hank knocks him out in one hit. Lucy immediately pulls her gun on her father, and she is ready to fire on him. However, Cooper saves the day and grazes Hank's face with one of his shots, and then makes a joke about, hey, you still want that autograph? Because that's what Hank had asked for back in the day in Barb's office. He takes this opportunity, standing in front of a Vault-Tec executive, to ask him, where is my family? Because as we saw in episode 1, Cooper was with his daughter. At this point, he had already divorced his wife when the bombs fell. This is what makes me think that either Barb didn't want to drop the bomb at this time, or that Vault-Tec actually wasn't the people, the entity to have dropped the bomb, because Cooper was outside with his daughter, and Barb would have known this. She would have known that her daughter was with Cooper in an extremely unsafe location, and if she wanted to save them, she would not have been the one to drop the bomb. So either something happened at Vault-Tec last minute, and they decided to drop the bomb when she didn't want to, and she tried to fight back and stop them and then failed, or somebody else dropped it. I feel like that's the only two options that could have happened. Hank, understanding that he is outgunned by Cooper at this moment, cowardly turns and runs. He uses the jetpack on the power armor to jump off the ledge and runs away. And at this point, Lucy is left with no clear direction. And so Cooper offers her one. He tells her, everything that you know and have lived was decided over 200 years ago. I am trying to find out exactly what happened. If you want to find out what happened, you can come with me, we can find your dad, we can figure all of this out. Because what else do you have to do? What other purpose would you have in life at this point? And I think the only other thing that she would want to do is save her brother, to go back to Vault 33 and try to save him, and possibly anybody else in the vault. Just tell them the truth and let them make their own decisions. So Lucy has to tie up one last loose end, which is her own mother. So she fires on her mom, puts her out of her ghoulish misery, and then delivers the most badass okie dokie line in the entire show.
Okie dokie.
And walks off with Cooper. So Max comes to after having been knocked out by Hank, just in time to see Moldaver running away from the carnage of the battle to finally activate the cold fusion. She presses the big button, all of the energy starts to spread out, and Max can see the lights turning on in the distance on all the buildings that were previously used around Shady Sands, having limitless power being pumped to them now. And I think at this point he understands this is a lot bigger than what I thought it was. He probably has a conflict of who he wants to stick with, who he wants to put his allegiance to. But before he can really make any kind of decision, Moldaver dies, and she dies sitting next to Lucy's mother, holding her hand. I think there's some implied romance between the two. Definitely. I don't think it really has any meaning other than, yeah, they liked each other. But Moldaver dies next to Lucy's mother, having fulfilled her goal, which was to give cold fusion to the world. I don't really know how permanent this cold fusion is in the observatory. Like, if the Brotherhood wanted to, could they come and just pluck it out? Or is it permanently here and there for everybody to use freely? Possibly the only way to turn off the power or remove it would be to destroy the cold fusion, which obviously the Brotherhood would not want to do either. But Moldaver seems happy with where she is with her goal. So Max is sitting there trying to wrap his head around everything that's happened, when Dane and the surviving Brotherhood soldiers run into there, see Moldaver dead, and immediately contribute that to Max. And so Dane lifts up Max's hand, and he is crowned a knight by Dane. They say, all hail Knight Maximus. Obviously, Max is very conflicted in this moment, because he knows that Moldaver was not an enemy, he knows that Lucy is not an enemy, and yet he just helped destroy those who Lucy would have helped. So I think at this point, Max's biggest problem is going to be escaping the Brotherhood and trying to make his way back to Lucy. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that play out in season 2. It's going to be a very angsty, pining story arc to follow, and I'm going to eat it up. So these final few minutes of the show are some of the best, honestly. And nothing is even said. There's no dialogue. And we get to see Cooper walking away from, it looks like a graveyard or a mausoleum, and Lucy and Dogmeat are following him. We can see the Hollywood sign in the distance, so they are in Hollywood, and they are assumedly on their search for Lucy's father. And she is following him, following Cooper, and they are at this point traveling as equals. They are not prisoner and master at this point. They are partners on a trek toward the same goal. And then the most epic scene of this episode and of the entire show, debatably, the camera pans up from the ground. We get to see an awesome Deathclaw skull, super awesome looking, and Hank is marching in his power armor through the desert. The camera pans up over Hank's back as he's looking out over a cliff, over a horizon, and lo and behold, he is headed towards New Vegas in all of its glory. And I studied this shot of New Vegas and the surrounding area for a while, trying to figure out exactly what direction he's facing it from, and what these little mini settlements with smoke coming out of them are. It doesn't look to scale with the game, with New Vegas. Like, the quarry where all the Deathclaws are is nowhere to be seen, or I couldn't make it out. I can't confidently call any of those settlements Good Springs or Novak or anything, but I know they're going to come into play in the next season. They have to. In addition, there's going to have to be some characters from New Vegas. There have to be. I'm so excited to see what they do with season 2 that's going to be focused on New Vegas. You know, the only criticism of this show that I have seen was the whole New Vegas timeline issue with the bombing of Shady Sands. And I think that season 2 is going to rectify that. And all of those New Vegas fans who were mad about it will have a much better explanation given to them that satisfies both the game and the show lore. Because that is important. And so finally, in the end credits, you know, they always do the pan through some sort of location while the credits roll. This time it's through the city of New Vegas. It's not completely in ruins. I mean, Lucky 38 is still standing. There are some buildings still standing, but there's no people. The Securitrons are all broken and deactivated. And there is a very notable red haze throughout the entire city. So this is where the most theories that I've seen have come from, is what is the state of New Vegas at this point? Why is all the Securitrons broken? What is the canon ending of New Vegas? What happened to the city after the events of the game, New Vegas? If the red haze is to be trusted and taken as what New Vegas actually looks like, that couldn't be anything other than the cloud from the Sierra Madre, which was said to would eventually expand to all of the Mojave Wasteland. Is that it would spread from the Sierra Madre to the surrounding area. However, when Hank was looking at it, it didn't have that same haziness, at least from where he was. So it could be just a design choice of the end credits, but it's possible that the Sierra Madre's cloud took over New Vegas and killed everybody. If that were the case, then what would be the point of Hank returning there, right? So, I don't really know, obviously. I don't know what the state of New Vegas is, and we probably won't know for another 2 years, at least, or however long it takes Amazon to get season 2 made, because season 2 is happening. I mean, what a show, right? What a plot, what an ending, what a cliffhanger. Masterful, in my opinion. So well done. And I have very, very high hopes for season 2 that they will learn from the criticism that they've received on the first season, which is not much. And my personal criticism is only on the way that they handled humor. I hope that they tackle that a little better next season, make it a little more grown up and not so slapsticky SNL sketch. Like, that's still not even a huge deal, you know. I'm looking forward to seeing the second season, regardless of where they take it. Because I trust them at this point. After this season, I do trust the people that made this to do a really good job continuing it on. Who knows how long this show's going to go for. If it's anywhere near as popular in the next season, then they would have to do another one, I would think. Not to mention another game. So, that was my recap of the show. I really didn't expect it to take as long as it did for me to get these videos out. But that's just how much time that I have had to do things with the way my IRL life has been. So, as far as my next videos from here, I'm going to be getting back into playing some games. Fallout London is still not out yet, unfortunately, but it could come out any day now. So that is going to kind of be a when it happens kind of thing. I'm just going to keep an eye on it and play it as soon as I'm able. Y'all let me know what kind of games you want me to see playing going forward in the comments. If you want me to resume the previous games that I was playing, I can. But I just want to hear from you guys. because you've been really receptive on these last few videos, and there's a lot more of you now than when I started making these videos. So I appreciate everybody who's followed along, who's commented, subscribers, everybody. Y'all are awesome. And I'm excited to get back into my usual content of playing games. So please let me know what you'd like to see me play. Any comments that you had on this episode or the entire show that I did not get to. And, I don't know, just let me know your favorite fall vegetable. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next one. Till then, peace out.